Hey there. So earlier this year, I made a demo in Framer showing off a snippets library I've been developing. And the point of the demo was to show you how you could use these snippets to quickly affect a lot of the properties and animations you'd need to make a prototype. So we made a simple prototype, and today I'd like to make that same basic prototype in Origami. And the reason being is that the two tools approach prototyping in a pretty different way. And in some cases, people might be transitioning from one tool to the other, and it might be cool to see the same process done two different ways. Or in some cases, people might be choosing between the two tools and trying to figure out which one works best for their work style. So we're going to do the same process, but we are going to be doing it in Origami. So this is what we're building. Basically a button state that pops open into a second state and just toggles between them. Cool, let's get started. So the first thing we'll do is grab an asset, and I'll be dropping that in the layer list here. That's the bottom right panel in Origami. You can see it shows up in the canvas. I will change the background fill color to the blue that I would like it to be. The next couple things I'd like to do is affect the display of this image. So I want to set the height and width both to 180. I also want to set the radius to 180, which makes it a circle instead of a square. In Framer, I used a snippet to do that, basically dividing the height and width in two, and then setting the radius from that. And then I want to set a shadow. So I'll do 30% shadow. I want it to be 16 radius, and I want it to be offset by 16. I also want to set a white stroke. So the width of that should be, I think, 6. Cool. So now we have our initial state stylized already. So really fast. Okay, cool. So now let's add some text layers. Oops. So I'm going to grab a text layer here, and I'm going to name this one title. I'm going to grab the text for it over here. I enter the text in the text field of the text layer. And I want this to be a bold system font, sure. And I had the size I wanted it to be 28. Cool. And then I set my height already, that to be 133. Cool. Now I'll do my second text layer. And I will call this one subtitle. I want this one to be regular. I have the text over here again. I want the font to be 13 and the Y to be 173. Cool. So now I want to change between states. So this is all the different layers I'm interested in for this prototype. Actually, I'm going to take the title and subtitle and group them because they're always going to move together. So I can hit Command G and make a group, and then I will just rename that group text. That'll make it a little simpler. So how do we make interactions in Origami? So on the right side here is your layers and your properties. That's all the stuff that's essentially static. It can be affected, but these are static values at one point in time. In the center area, we have the patches, and the patches are essentially the interactions. So we'll start by creating the touch interaction for pressing that button. And when you hover over an item in the layer list, you can see this little area that says touch. I tap that, and I want it to be basically like a tap interaction. So now I have a patch that shows up here in the middle, and this is my correct layer. And what I want to happen is when I press down on the button, I want the state to change. And a state is always a switch, essentially, in origami. So what I'll do here is tap that and look for a switch. Now I have this switch, and every time I press down, it's going to switch between two states. Those two states are on and off. From this, I can affect many, many things. But in this particular case, I know that my prototype is just going to be one animation. So the first thing I want to change is the animation, because that animation will affect everything that comes after it. So I grab this here and I type pop, which is a pop animation. This gives you some like cool abilities to, it's sort of like spring-loaded animations. I'm going to choose a bounciness of 10 and a speed of 12. I don't know if that's right, but we can affect it later. So let's just show you how this works now. If I start touching the May layer, you can see it's flipping between on and off. And when it flips on and off, it animates after that point. Cool. So like now we want to animate some stuff. The first thing we want to animate is the size of the May layer. So I will, I'm going to create a transition here. And a transition just allows progress to affect between two different values. So my starting value for the May layer, the height and width are both 180. So that's where I want it to start. And I want it to get bigger. I think I want it to go up to 270. So I'm going to set that as the end value. Now I can drag this up into the property list up here on size. I can do it individually, so just the width or just the height, but I can do the whole size of the layer and it'll affect both of them. You can see the height and width are both affected now. So when I start tapping this, it'll grow and shrink. The next thing I want to affect is the corner radius, because I basically want it to turn from a circle into a rounded rectangle. So the initial corner radius was 180, but I want it to go to 60. So I can grab that and then go to radius, choose that. It fills in the patch for me. You can see now it's turning into a square from a circle. I want this thing to be centered to the bottom when it changes state though. And right now you can see it's scaling from the middle. There's multiple ways to do this in origami. There are anchors and pivots. In this case, I'm going to use a patch to describe the difference in height that needs to take place, only because I like working that way, but there's different ways you can do this. I know that it is 45 points higher because the total change is 90 points between the two different values. So that's half of it. You can do the math for that too, like in origami, using like division, using subtraction. How do you do division? Oh yeah, there it is. I guess you can't type it. Cool. So there's different ways to do that, but in this case, that's what I'm doing. And then I put that on the Y value because this thing needs to move vertically to compensate for its size that it's gaining. So tap that now. You can see it's staying in place and changing between the values. Okay. So the next thing that needs to happen is this text needs to either be on or off. I mean, the opacity of this text needs to be on or off depending on the state. I can skip this transition step in this case because I'm moving up between a progress of 0 and 1. And I can take this same progress and put it directly on the text's opacity. And now you'll see the text comes in and goes out as I press the button. I'll move this down here for clarity. But one thing I don't like is I want the text to come in actually a little after the whole animation occurs. So what I'll do is I'm going to put a delay in between. So I'm going to connect the progress to the delay to the value of the text opacity. Now I want there to be 0.2 second delay. The animation is running a little slow because I am trying to record this simultaneously, but the idea is that it's coming in afterward. The problem is, as I go to the other state, the text stays there before it goes back. There's a little style element of delay, and I can do it so it only happens when the value is increasing. So in this case, I tap the button, it comes in after the fact. When I tap it again, it immediately goes away as I tap the button because the delay only occurs when it is increasing. Cool. And then I just wanted to add like one more little exciting element to this prototype, which is pretty easy to do. In Origami, I can take transitions and I can have them affect different stuff. So if I control click on it and choose type, there are other things other than numbers that I can transition between. So for example, I want to transition the whole background color. So I go here, I can tap here. I want the initial state to be this blue color, but I want it to actually become like a dark gray state when I go to the big button. So I can go and I can attach that to the fills color. And then when I tap this, boop, the whole background changes color as I change state. It's super easy. So that's it. That didn't take very long. I think the cool thing about Origami is that you can be very rapid in your prototyping. Once you like learn these concepts that are necessary to pull things together, it just is a very fast way to create a prototype. It is not exactly easy to get there, and I would never think that anyone should feel like jumping into Origami is going to be a cakewalk. It's a different way of thinking than you've probably ever had to do before if you've never done it. And I recommend all of the tutorials that are on the Facebook resources site and the Origami site. I think that's a great place to start, but really it comes down to, at least in my case, having been able to talk to people and ask questions. And the way to do that is the Facebook Origami group on Facebook. You can ask questions there, read other questions that have occurred there, and see answers. People are extremely friendly and willing to help. And yeah, just wanted to show the difference between those two tools, different workflow. Hope that was helpful. Have a good day.